Good morning. Try again. Good morning. All right. I am a proud payments nerd, and it is a delight, a genuine delight to spend the day with my fellow payments nerds. I have been in this industry and at the intersection of corporate finance, bankers, and the technology solutions that serve both, and sometimes individually, all of these players. And I can genuinely say I have never been so excited about what we're doing as an industry and the new tools and capabilities and cooperation that we are using to solve some really staggering problems that have troubled us for a long time, and we are now able to do so much more. And I'm thrilled to have on stage with me today a panel to share real-world examples, lessons learned, and some of the impact and benefit that they have been able to bring to their customers and to their employees as a result of modernizing their payment infrastructure. So we have Brian Glaze, Chief Accounting Officer at Stewart, Doug Anderson, Chief Product Officer at AvidXchange, and Julia Jansen, VP of Global Finance Operations at Navan. Come on out. So before we get started and start sharing your stories, this panel was titled Modernizing Payment Infrastructure. I want to just start by saying, like, what does that mean to you? What is payment infrastructure in your world? Julia.
I think my first question is, do you even know how you're paying or how you're receiving payments? Do you know what your issuing banks are? Do you know how you pay your payroll? Do you know how you pay your AP? And I'm Berlin-based, I'm European. Do you have foreign legal entities? Do you know what their issuing banks are? Do you know how you potentially have a little payment going out there by hand? Is somebody a vendor or supplier sending you data like a check? Very uncommon concept in Europe, but I know it exists.
We're working on it. We're working on that.
Now, do you actually know your landscape? Do you know your networks, your issuing banks? Do you know the flows? Are you actually aware as the finance leader of how you're paying things?
So from your perspective, it's really all the participants and the various component parts.
Yeah, and do you know potentially what your biggest risks are? And do you have visibility in those payment flows? I know you feel it when something is going wrong. You'll feel it very loud. But if everything is going smooth, it's really quiet. You don't potentially know where your biggest payment flows are. And do you know what your potential teams have as pains around, as we heard, reconciliation? And potentially sometimes it's not as painful to your own teams, but to your employees or to your vendors. So do you actually know your landscape?
And how are you thinking about infrastructure at Avid?
I like to start with the customer first, which is, I think about infrastructure, including payment infrastructure, as everything that underpins the experience you're trying to deliver, right? And if you take that view, right, it moves you beyond, I think, the classical or maybe legacy definition of infrastructure, which was like, at some point there's a team, they're like in the back office, nobody sees who they are, knows their names, and they're just putting servers together or doing stuff, to like, what's everything you need to seamlessly deliver a payment or 1 million payments, right, in a single execution.
And to streamline all this stuff on either side of those transactions.
That's right, right. And so infrastructure, I was thinking about it, again, this sort of grand wild view is like, roads, right? There's a difference between the gravel road, which a lot of payments run over, right? And what Eisenhower conceived as like the modern interstate highway system, and just think about that difference of that comparison, and that's what infrastructure can be to payments. There's this big leap forward opportunity that I think we're living through now.
Thank you. Brian.
So Stewart is a 130-year-old title company and very, very conservative. Not a lot of innovation has gone on in the last 130 years. But our infrastructure is comprised of a lot of disparate systems. They don't talk to each other. Every integration is unique. We have 12 title production systems. We built an internal, proprietary wire management system. So we have integrations, unique integrations with all of our banks, all of our internal systems, some of our customer systems, and we have to have teams to support all of that. And so that's what infrastructure is in the title industry and what we're looking to get away from and modernize.
So what instigated this modernization journey that you're on? I'm going to have Doug share, what triggered change within your environment at your company?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to the experiences we want to deliver. And, we don't have 130 years of experience, but 25. And so a lot of the payment infrastructure we had built over time, came about when things like modern treasury didn't exist, And so we were like building bespoke rail by rail as those rails became viable and available, credit card infrastructure, ACH infrastructure, check infrastructure. And now, there's a better way, and we don't have to maintain it on our own because that's not actually the differentiation for our business, is the infrastructure, right? It's the experiences we want to deliver. So, now is the time because we have a vision about the experiences we want to deliver, which include things like, real-time payments, expanding the number of offerings we have to our buyers about how they can send payments, about the supplier side of the network and how they can receive payments. That's where the differentiation is going to be. It's no longer going to be in the rails that they run over.
No. I mean, the payments are becoming commoditized, and it's all the value add that we offer on either side that is really the true source of differentiation and delight.
Yeah. So, long short, we just want to get out of the infra business.
Cool. Julia, what prompted modernization at Navan? And I know you're from an acquired entity, so tell us a little bit about that journey.
So I think you talked about user or customer, but for me, the user is also your own employees, right? So I joined Navan by actually being acquired. So my company was a travel management company in Europe, and I ran the classic finance functions. And I didn't think about T&E that much. Travel was covered as my own, we run travel. But the E part, the expenses, I'm like, I have it under control because my finance team is happy. We're just putting our users through hell, which means our employees. They have to front the money, and my finance team is super happy about that because no problems with payments and full control because if you want the money back, you have to make sure you give them the invoice. Total happiness about that part of reconciliation, and then you reimburse them eventually, one way or the other. So when we were acquired and Navan said, hey, we have an expense solution and we can make everything get paid and your user gets a corporate physical card or you can use reimbursements, I'm like, how am I going to tell that to my head of AP that he's going to give up some of that control? That was not that easy because, he comes from a world of full control, right? But whenever I'm in the kitchen, in the coffee kitchen, people will come up to me and be like, Julia, is there something better about these Excels or receipts or expenses or fronting the money? I'm like, yeah, eventually I just have other things to fix first, but I'll come around. And then we got acquired, and then I went for coffee in Berlin with one of our product leaders, and he just literally paid the coffee, and I said, and reimbursed, and everything was paid for. And I'm like, but you could use this card to buy a Tesla, right? He was like, no, it's policy controlled. I can only spend it, let's say, for coffee because that's allowed, and I can upload the receipt immediately. For me, it was mind-blowing. I thought I was a dynamic finance leader, but for me, that was mind-blowing. It's like you have a payment function, it is controlled, it's visible. My head of OP ran one country at the time, is now running 11 countries. Because of that scale, you know, and you don't have to put your employees through hell.
We
I wish I
don't
learned that a
want
bit
to put employees through hell.
earlier. A little bit earlier, I could have done that.
Okay, all right, cool. As you've made changes to your infrastructure, what have been the biggest challenges, and how have you mitigated those challenges, both in terms of impact internally to your payments operations teams, to the participants in your organization that are interfacing with clients, and then how is it that you have transitioned customers to these new tools that you've implemented? Share a little bit with us, Brian.
So we're pretty early in our journey. We just started down the payments modernization path last fall. So we're not there yet, but we're in the process. But some of the challenges that we faced and are facing, and I mentioned it earlier, we have a lot of legacy systems that aren't cutting edge technology, so it's very difficult. They're incompatible with a lot of the newer technologies. We're having to kind of bridge that gap. We also work in a very high transaction volume environment, and we want to obviously modernize that, make it a lot more efficient. Just, you know, a couple of examples. In closing real estate transactions, we write about 1.5 million checks every year, and we process about 500,000 incoming wire transfers and about 500,000 outgoing wire transfers. So we've got to have partners that can scale with our business, and so it's been making sure that we have partners that really have the technology that can move us forward, and obviously we're moving toward an environment where we're getting rid of and cutting out check writing, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if we can eliminate wire transfers and eliminate checks, that'll be incredible. The other couple of things that were challenges for us, and being kind of new on the path, we have a number of strategic projects that are in play right now, and so we had to really figure out, can we undertake this right now? Because it's exciting and it's interesting, but we have to make sure that we can get it done and get it done correctly. And one of those other aspects was cost, and so we had to make sure that we could stage it and the ROI made sense. And if you've started down the payment modernization path, you kind of quickly realize how much more efficient your company can be, and how much what the ROI can be on a project like this. And so it was a little bit mind-boggling when we ran the numbers and saw what it could do for the Stewart organization.
And where are you in this journey? You're just at the beginning? I'm just to gauge.
Yeah, so we kicked off in the fall of 23, okay. And it's kind of a three-year project, although it's going to continue to evolve forever. And so the interesting thing is it'll be cash flow positive to us by the end of the first 12-month phase. So it makes a lot of sense.
I'd love to get a little more color on your expectations that you've set internally around the benefits. Is it coming from reducing cost? Is it coming from being able to have more throughput and more volume?
Yeah, it's a little bit of several different areas, including not only internal controls around wire fraud and check fraud, but also the customer experience. Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, the title industry is pretty stable, not a lot of innovation, not a lot of change, but the way you're going to win is to provide the very best customer experience. And so our focus is on ease of use with customers, and making sure that we got to do the back office stuff right and quickly, and the reconciliation tools incredible. So things like that are exciting from internal, but the customer experience has to be the best.
Great, thank you for sharing. Doug, share with us a bit on sort of where you are in your journey and the challenges that you've faced and how you've overcome them, or in the midst of overcoming them.
Yeah, so we've jumped in with both feet, so we're swimming with and against the tide at times. I think the biggest challenge starts with I grew up building Legos, so I still think of like building product and technology as like Legos for adults, and so the hardest, I would say, challenge was kind of getting to that groundbreaking day, where you were going to like actually start shipping things, because there's so much that goes into getting, your scope, your alignment, your business case, like everything you need so that you have conviction that you're ready to break ground and go after this. Again, this is an enterprise, I think, context discussion. So we're not talking about, a single agile team experimenting on one thing. For us, we have 30 different agile teams that are actually working against this, right? Who are going to be delivering value over the course of 3 years, right? And so sequencing that out, making sure you've kind of got that all done. And so, the way we approach that is, number one, from a product philosophy, is that product management isn't like a singular visionary, that we go off to the mountain, dip our cup in the water, and then come back to the company and tell them what we saw in the reflection. It was more like, we drive a thing called X teams. And X teams, a lot of people in this room, if you worked in a consumer startup or enterprise, you've seen, you've heard about the triangle of product, engineering, design. Well, in B2B, especially B2B SaaS, what I find most effective is where you also have, voice of sales or revenue and voice of customer, right? So it's kind of like, product, engineering, design are partnered also with the voice of your prospect, who you're trying to sell to, and the voice of your customer, who's reminding you of all the things that you failed to deliver that you promised to, And so you basically put these X teams together in a room and make them go come up with the plans, and they come up with, the right outcomes, So it's a lot of empowerment in that model, but it also, if you look at it from a biological, we're all living in organizations, is at that cellular level, it's very reflective of the rest of the organization in terms of like, if you go look at your C-suite, you're like, oh, actually you have like the C-suite represented in that room. Now you've driven the decisions down there, go come up with the right answers for these things, And so the outcome is not just like a plan in terms of like technically, here's how we're gonna do this, and here's the Gantt charts that just kind of back up timelines, but the buy-in, right? The conviction of people that are like, we can do this, right? Because I had all the right people at the table representing all the pieces of the organization who were also thinking about the customer together. So that's the approach.
I love your evangelist energy. But sometimes that's what it takes to make a difference in operations, in the back office. Right? You're out there fighting the good fight.
Yeah. Yeah, but a healthy dose of pragmatism, As I always try to remind my teams is like, look, don't get excited because I'm excited, right? Get excited because you believe in the plan and it's gonna work, right? Like that's why you're gonna take the risk, to go after this project or put your career on the line, do all these things, not because, I'm fired up and like, we have a bunch of rah-rah. That's just candy, Fun at the time, short acting, fades quickly, The plan, though, sticks around.
That's great. That's really great. Let's shift from talking about challenges and overcoming challenges to the actual impact and value that each of you are able to deliver or anticipate delivering to your end users, to the businesses, the buyers and suppliers, to employees that are out transacting in the world, and to home buyers that are, that's a big moment. There's a lot of anxiety surrounding those transactions. Yep. So I'd like to invite Julia to start off and talk about the benefits you're experiencing.
Of upgrading?
And B is, I want you to, and we heard a lot of like hypothetical Like, oh, these are all these cool things. Let's get really real about the impact and the examples.
Oh, I'm a finance person. I can go into details, no problem. I'm not gonna.
And quantify the benefit as well.
No. So I think for me, very graspable is the power that, I don't know, payments and virtual cards can have for, we heard the word reconciliation. But as an example, it's like, sometimes my teams get customers that send my team a credit card statement at month end. Like, I have like 4,000 transactions on there. I think they look like flights. Can you tell me which bookings they belong to? Like just purely reconciliation. So they're at month end close. They just pulled their credit card statement. They have about 3 days to close the books. And they tell me, I don't know, maybe it's 4,000 transactions. Can you just quickly give me back what bookings they belong to? And the traveler, and in a perfect world, the cost center. So all of that is technically unnecessary, right? Because the world of payments or virtual cards or travel payments, there's a world where you have auto reconciliation. You don't need to wait till month end close, and B, you can add all those data levels, or what we heard earlier, a second set of data that comes from somewhere else, to that data immediately, live, and you don't have to struggle. Or sometimes we get it from overnight, and they're like, oh, we have a close tomorrow. Can you just, there are like 60,000 transactions on there. Could you turn that around in the next 12 hours? So I'm like, okay. So that's where I think these worlds of reconciliation can come in, because you have that data that you need for your month-end close, visible, fast, reliable. Technically, ideally, humans don't need to touch it, which is also not great in finance, right? If you modify and alter data. So just as an example, right? If you use that power of payments to add this layer of information already at time of payment, and you have it in your backend, you just have faster close and reliable data. But that's just me being a travel
Do you have instances where the users are using and querying and accessing that data before month end? I mean, is the benefit not just in terms of accounting?
It's during month end. Thank you for leading me with that question. I mean, I come from a world where also before, from classic finance functions or working for Big Four or consulting, did you know on your 4th day of the month what your spend was for travel? And what for? And who traveled? To where? And what's going to be the expected money you're going to spend? And do you potentially want to put more controls in? Or do you want to do an estimate of what your spend is going to be? If you have that visibility, especially around cross-border or in general payments, in the middle of the month, you can change how that month potentially is going to play out. You can put also other mechanisms in to ensure you don't get hit by a surprise at month end, right? For me, I think when I took finance functions before, just if you have thousands of payments coming into your bank account and thousands going out, just not knowing. I mean, we heard it before, right? But sometimes you just have to wait to month end to figure things out. How beautiful is it if you know every day what actually that money, all these gazillion transactions on your bank accounts are for, and you can check it. And you don't have to log into 14 systems to do so. I mean, running cross global companies or being in those, the amount of bank account logins and amount of authentications and SMS being sent and, Jesus, yeah. So I come from a world of pain. Like, oh, Julia, I think you have the wrong mobile number. I was like, what do you mean? Yeah, we can't log into the bank account. Okay, so do we know what cash we have? Yeah. Let's wait for the next person to wake up and then they can log in. So great, let's do that then. So yeah, so I think we forget sometimes that that's really the real world, right? Sometimes we come from worlds that are modernized and you have this beautiful future world, but the reality is, if you don't have your mobile phone, you're sometimes screwed making a bank payment as a finance persona, right? Like, your mobile phone is your friend. Or just, the 4 people, and they're like, oh, they are sick, or they're like out of there. So it's like, okay, so how does my money look like?
So we can't reconcile because someone's out. Yeah, no, I mean, this is the reality of the back office.
Yeah, or if you get the question from your CEO, can we do daily cash forecasting? Yeah, sure. Great. Rolling every day? Fresh for every 3 months? I'm just going to log in 14 times with my team in different bank accounts every day. No problem. So, yeah.
So the new world is definitely better.
The new world is better.
Definitely better. Do you want to share a little bit about the value that you'll be delivering to your end users as well as your teams?
Yeah, it's interesting when I think about building payments products, or finance products in general, our goal is for the end user to spend as little time engaging with the product as possible. So that's what the value is all about, and usually I think our key measures of success are how many times you don't have to log in, how many logins we can eliminate, because you don't even need to go into the system anymore. We're moving the interfaces out of what you think of as the traditional application, right?
And so where are they getting this information then? Is it embedded in their ERP? What does that actually mean in your world?
I mean, most of it is, they're running their core workflow, if you will, is running through ERPs, and if they never actually have to touch our system, that would be a win.
Okay.
Truly. And that's true of, our, because we have a payments network of our buyers and our suppliers. Where they want to do business is where they should do business. So that's a huge part of delivering that value and being able to measure it, which is how is that time on task being shrunk, number of tasks they need to perform, all those kind of things, just eliminate, eliminate, eliminate. And that includes, for sure, our internal teams too, because we deliver all this value for our end users, but it's growing the back office to make that happen, so.
Mm-hmm. A lot of what you are talking about is the ability to finally get rid of our reliance on manual processes to do all this day in, day out, necessary work to understand where the money belongs and how we need to codify it, basically. And I think this is part of why this is such an exciting time, because these things have taken all of these disparate processes and systems, and now we can do it so much more easily. And it's really powerful. Tell us about getting rid of those checks.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So a number of reasons spurred us into this project. So the customer experience, like I mentioned earlier, and a couple of specific examples. You're a home buyer, you find a property you want, and you've got to deposit earnest money with the title company. In the current state, you go to the bank, get a cashier's check, take it to the title company, fill out paperwork, and give them the check. In the next phase, hopefully that's done over an app, and you don't have to inconvenience the buyer. They can just take care of it from their phone or computer, and it's done. Our business on the residential side is generated typically through the real estate agents. So having great connectivity and good customer service with those real estate agents is number one in retaining that business. And so real estate agents live for their commission checks, and
that they do.
In the current state, we're FedExing a check or handing them a check, and typically they're of a size that they can't deposit online, so they're having to go to their bank. In the new world, our goal is that at the closing table, by the time the closing's done and everybody's shaking hands, the check's in the agent's bank. So from a customer experience, there's going to be many of those cases that really improve the experience. For us internally as a company, wire fraud, check fraud are huge in the real estate industry. And so through the technologies that we're working with, we're going to be able to even further enhance our fraud prevention. And by getting rid of checks, you're not going to have that potential there anyway. And then wire fraud, if we can move to more secure payment rails, then it's going to be that much better of of a transaction, both internally and for the customer. Because if there's a fraud on a transaction, everybody's impacted. We're impacted, the buyer, the seller, lot of impact when something goes wrong. So we're really looking forward to that. And then on our internal processing, not having a team cutting checks either at the office level or in the back office is going to be huge. And then kind of finally, just the whole cost structure of modern payment rails is so much more economical than wire transfers and obviously cutting a check. So we're excited about all of that, and I've learned a lot in the last 6 months about faster payments and the different payment rails, and it'll be really interesting to kind of see where we are this time next year. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, each of you, for sharing your experience, your lessons learned, and inspiring us. Really appreciate your remarks. Thank you.
Thanks.